Trey Smith might miss mandatory minicamp and get fined all day long. I think it could happen. What happens next today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back to Locked On Chiefs, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listener today. Check out another Locked On show for your next one, because we got you all day long, all week long, 5 times a week plus. You everydayers, you know that. We appreciate you locos hanging out and being with us all the time on all the platforms, whether it's here on YouTube or on the audio platforms. Maybe you're getting on the text line at 816-357-8781. Get into that as well. We do very much appreciate you being here with us because we have a lot to talk about. I personally have some thoughts about what may and may not happen. Last week, I was certain things may have changed over this last 7 days. So we're going to get into that. The risers and fallers are coming up later in the show. We're going to go through where everybody's at there and the full strength receiving core. What could that mean and look like? Is it a possibility? That's next. But we start at the top of the list, and that is the guy that is close to being a top 3 paid offensive guard in this league. And I felt like last week it was just too far to go for him to miss mandatory. I know that they're not super happy with each other. He has not been here, Trey Smith, for any of the OTAs to this point. But this is where money matters. And it's a quick escalation, too. You start next week if he misses the first day of mandatory minicamp, meaning that he does not participate and he is not in the building. That is a distinction we should make. 17 grand the first day, 35 the next day, 50 the next day. He could lose 104 grand for not coming to these 3 practices in some way, shape, or form. I don't think that happens. I don't think it gets to a finable spot, but I am starting to feel like with Andy Reid's comments that he can't really say whether he's going to be here. There's one way around the fines that I think is probably the most likely scenario right now. And I know you know the lowdown. Would you think that that is likely what's to happen?
I'm going to be curious to see if he shows up. I mean, the reality is he could show up and just do a hold in, be at the facility, be on the field with the team, but not practice and not get fined. And quite frankly, it's possible that the team would want that just as much as Trey would, because the reality is right now he did sign his franchise tag. So you're under obligation for $23.4 million. Do you really want to have him out there risking injury with that as his deal? So I could see a situation where both the team and he would come to an agreement. Hey, I'll show up, but I'm not going to practice. That would make a lot of sense. The other side of that is that if he doesn't show up and he does get fined, the team can't just let that go. Like, it is in the CBA. It has to be paid, but there's a way around it. Around it is, I guess, maybe not the right way to put it. There is a way to deal with it, and it's just give him a little bit extra signing bonus to cover the $100,000 fine that he has, and it is what it is.
Right, and that's really what it comes down to. If you can make that adjustment and try to take care of him, that's what's important. I agree with you, and that's the thing that I'm kind of leaning towards right now. So if you show up and you go to the meetings, you don't get fined. You don't have to be on the practice field, and you still don't get fined. I think that's probably the best of both worlds. Whether he chooses to do that or not, I'm interested to find out, because it goes a long way to say, I'm going to come in, I'm going to participate, I'm going to give my advice to the younger guys, especially the next guy that we're going to talk about. But I'm not going to put myself out there for an injury, especially when we don't have a long-term deal. I think that's perfectly acceptable. I'm good with that. I don't think that's a negative going into the season. Do you?
I don't think it's a negative. I actually think it could be a positive because when you start looking at it, he doesn't need the snaps. The team knows what he is. He knows what the team is going to be doing. He understands what the team is doing and what their role or what his role in the offense is. So that's not an issue. But you're getting some of those young guys to get more snaps and get more ability to, get some time with some of the other guys that they wouldn't normally get time with next to. And I understand they're not hitting people. They're not really blocking people. So you don't have that aspect of getting chemistry with guys, but you still are firing off the ball. You're still getting kind of a cadence of some sort that's a little bit different. You get to see how people move and what they're doing and different things. And the other thing is, you start looking at it, if he shows up for mandatory minicamp after not being there all to OTAs, he's likely, if they're going to have him practice, he's likely going to get all those snaps. And then you're not rotating guys through to really get them snaps at other positions that maybe you would otherwise. I mean, we talked about, Matt and I kind of talked about CJ Hansen. We talked about Hunter Norzad. Those are a couple of guys that could be guys that would be fitting into that right guard position. Obviously, Mike Caliendo is in a competition with Kingsley Suamataia, and we need to talk about that as well. But it's all about who can you get in there, who can you make a guard for a couple of snaps just to see if they understand kind of what they're doing, if they can maybe play that position and get you comfortable going to a situation where they're going to be doing that in the regular season. Because one of the biggest things that Matt and I talked about when we talked about the roster on Wednesday was how many players there are going to be at that O-line position that you are probably going to have to keep. And it is going to make it extremely difficult just to have, I mean, you're talking 5 deep at the tackle position. If you talk 5 interior offensive linemen, you got to figure Trey Smith, Kingsley Suamataia, Mike Caliendo, and Norzad, and Creed Humphrey.
Yeah, makes
and you're kicking a guy that you drafted last year off the team, and anybody else that's going to show up at that interior position. Sorry, it's such a logjam.
It is, and it's difficult. Now, Kingsley's a guy who got thrown into that last year. He had some words today that encouraged me in that he said he fell in love with playing inside a guard, and that's great. We didn't hear from him last year. His after the first 2 games of the season where he got pulled and was benched after that, the next 2 times he got action the rest of the season, the only 2 games he played significant snaps were up against Denver. The first time it was still a tackle a lot, 46 snaps there, but 31 at guard to end the season in week 18, right? And he said that what made him feel like he was making the transition was that he got a lot of compliments from his opponent in that second game. Didn't play a lot against Zach Allen as a tackle, but when he moved inside, he saw him all day long. He's got a history with Allen. I think the family thing is there as well. But Allen had maybe one of the best defensive tackle seasons of the season last year. So coming from him and a guy that was just moving to Denver to kind of make his mark, I thought he was the spark plug for them that allowed some of their edge rushers to really work off of, much like Chris Jones is in this defense. So I take that as a huge plus. And at that point, he allowed 1 hit in that game. Kingsley did as a left guard. I'm not concerned about that. And I feel like, again, he's still one of the best 5 as I can put it together. And that could become 6 depending on what happens with the left tackle competition for a guy you talked about a lot yesterday with Simmons. But I feel better now about the left guard spot than I have in quite a while.
Well, and it's crazy because the past, 3 or 4 years that Joe Thuney's been here, you've never thought about that position. It's just been Joe Thuney is going to be there. He is going to be the guy that's the starter, and he's going to take care of that position, and it's not going to be an issue. And now you have a completely different scenario where you have a second-year guy stepping into that role and having to take on Joe Thuney's shoes. That is not a position that I am that's not a position that I am jealous of Suamataia having to be in, because that is a large hole to fill. But he does have the skill set for it. He does have the ability to move, and he does have some pedigree there as well. So it's going to be fun to see what he's able to do. Obviously, he had some great words to say, and I do think it was encouraging what he said at OTAs afterwards today. The next step, obviously, is going to be mandatory minicamp, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But you also are going to really get an idea of where this stands when you start getting into training camp, and that is going to be about a month away. And so at this point, it's kind of a waiting game.
Yeah, agreed. The other thing that is a waiting game as to what is the wide receiver group going to look like, that's coming up next. There's nothing like the atmosphere of the NBA playoffs. Every bucket, defensive stop, and moment feels huge. It's electric in those arenas. And with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I use it all over the place for every sports, every event I can get there, I do. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets last minute or not with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account and use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, all you got to do is create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. It's last minute tickets, it's lowest prices, and it's guaranteed. Guaranteed is always a good thing. It isn't something the Chiefs have had a ton of lately. A lot of questions about what is a full strength Chiefs receiving core. There's a lot of talent here. A team that has had to keep 7 receivers in the past. Don't want to do that again because I do feel there are 6 guys that are going to be able to separate themselves. But as we look, Rashee Rice, what he's coming to off the field has been kind of hanging like a cloud. I don't feel like I've been terribly concerned about it. Maybe that's, for better or worse. That's been my thought. But it looks like I'm not alone. How are you feeling right now about the condition of Rashee Rice and his situation?
Well, if we're talking about the way he looks physically and the way he's able to move, I think that you got to feel pretty good about that compared to where he was last year, obviously coming off the injury. If you're talking about his legal issues, it's up in the air. And I know that's where you're going. I'm just saying the reality is we don't know anything. And it's possible that he ends up playing the full season. It's possible nothing happens. I don't know what the holdup is. I would have thought that if they were going to do something, they would have already done it by now. But the reality is that we're, 3 months away from, this is June, so we're basically 3 months away from the regular season starting, and no such information has come out. We're already over a year removed basically from the time that this happened. So at this point, I would think that it's getting more and more likely that he could be not suspended at all this season. And the only thing I will say is that I would hope if they're going to do something, they get it done before the season. Because to me, the worst case scenario would be them to do something in October and him miss the entire second half of the season because some legal issues come about with this.
Yeah. And that's what's got me feeling more optimistic now that if it was going to happen, it likely would have happened. The wheels of justice don't slow down for you. So I feel like the league is going to base it off of what happens off the field. And if you're not seeing anything movement-wise on specifics in a courtroom, it just feels like there's going to be opportunity here for him to play. Does he need to pay the piper eventually? Probably, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be right now.
Well, and there's going to be civil lawsuits, and there's I think another civil lawsuit that got filed. But the problem that they're going to have with the civil lawsuits is they're really probably going to be having to wait on the criminal lawsuit. So at that point, it's just a question of how things are going to work out. When you look at what this is going to mean for the wide receiver room, you look at what Rashee Rice brought to the table and what he could bring to the table in year 3. What do you see this meaning for this full strength wide receiver core as we move into getting ready to move into the minicamp sessions?
I think what we saw last year gives us a clue, right? Despite one-handed catches and OTAs from Xavier Worthy and him knowing a lot more of where he's going and what he's doing, it still feels to me like the plan is still the same. Rashee Rice is the thing that stirs the drink here, right? I don't think he is the secondary. I don't think Hollywood Brown is wide receiver 1 in this offense. This runs through Rashee Rice if it's not Travis Kelce. And I think both Hollywood, especially as he came back and was, I think, limited in what they used him for, as design, not out of a plan. I think that's going to continue. I think it's going to be Rashee 1, probably Hollywood 2, and Xavier on plays designed to get Xavier open would be there at that point. It feels like if he is able to stay on the field, play a full season, he will be the leading pass catcher in both targets, catches, and yards, in my opinion, by a decent margin, is what it feels like to me.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And the reality of the situation, and I kind of touched on this a little bit in yesterday's show, is when you start looking at the wide receivers and you start looking at how this is going to play out, it's a question of what do you have past 5? And that really is what this comes down to, because the reality and looking at it from the taking a step back and looking at it, you have Hollywood Brown, you have Rashee Rice, you have Xavier Worthy, You know all those are going to make it. Jalen Royals is going to be on this roster. Generally speaking, 95% chance possibility right now, at least with what we know, Juju is going to be on this roster. So at that point, you're really only looking at one wide receiver. And if they don't find somebody that is a corner or a running back of some sort, it's got to be somebody with return ability, which is going to severely limit what they can do in that sense. So the reality is that you have all these other wide receivers, especially some of them that have been in Kansas City for a long time. And I know people are not going to like it, but Sky Moore had to play at OTAs. We'll see if that translates
100%.
to training camp or preseason. Justin Ross is another one that's been in Kansas City for a long time. There are going to be guys that are going to be competing for maybe one spot, unless there's something that happens to Juju that we don't know about right now.
That's completely fair. And I think there's going to be ups and downs. I think when the rubber hits the road, it's going to be, I think, a very, very close decision when it all comes down to the knuckles. We're going to find out. But in order to do that, he has to continue to be on the rise, and somebody else has to be on the fall. Who are those guys up and down coming next? There's a lot of ups and downs, and you have to take them as they come. But a lot of hubbub being made right now for what looks like the running back depth chart. I'm not surprised. This is exactly what I expected. 3 veterans up front and the phenom rookie kid bringing up 4th place. It is not Carson Steele being used as a fullback, at least as we see very much. Still more of a fullback role. Okay, great. I'm good with that. That's the treatment they gave Sherm. I think he offers more athleticism than Sherm did. So if you're going to keep a fullback and using as sparingly as this offense does, I think he gives you more boom than bust in that role. So that's fine. But right now, it looks like Pacheco, then Kareem Hunt, then Elijah Mitchell, the veteran, and then Rashee Smith. And none of that shocks me. Does it for you?
Doesn't shock me. The question is can they really keep 5 running backs and running backs or, with a fullback in there? Can you do that? You're going to have to go low at another position. And that's the big question. And I have to get your opinion on this. I know we're talking risers and fallers, but Matt threw something out that kind of surprised me and said that maybe, Kansas City would have to feel like they would need to keep Bailey Zappi on the active roster. And if they have to do that, that changes everything.
Yes. Bailey needs to be there. Bailey is coming along. And I'll go back to why I've always liked him, right? He does a couple of things that are really important and very intriguing in this particular West Coast offense, right? He reads very quickly. He's visually accurate, and he delivers the ball with a quick release. He's great at making decisions quickly and acting on them. If you make him linger in the pocket and try to make him push the ball deep, you're asking for trouble. That's not his game. He's an intermediate to shallow passer that can zip it around and get it out of there. Gardner Minshew, on the other hand, does have a nice deep ball with a good arch. He allows players to run underneath it. And I think he also is somebody that I would not say he's as quick as Bailey Zappi is in his decision-making process, but he's able to get to the same point. They are slightly different flavors. And I wonder if you tried to put him onto the practice squad, if you would lose him yet again, because he was signed off of the practice squad last year. That is how this works. So if you want to safeguard the position, or if because of this particular schedule this year, if you want to give Patrick more rest going into the playoffs, you got to have a backup to your backup.
Here's an outside the box idea, NFL. In the next CBA, create a special 3rd QB position and go to 54. Solve the problem.
You don't need game day rosters and no reason for it.
You can go there too, but I'm just saying give them an extra roster position, because the reality is that you want to be able to develop that player, and it doesn't matter that there's not 54 guys that should be playing quarterback in the NFL. I get that. But there are 54 guys that you want to have a chance to try to develop and try to build something out of. And you need to have every team have the ability to have a couple of guys at that position, because if they don't, then you get in horrible positions and you have guys that are starting in games that just really suck.
No one wants to see that. It just isn't part of it. Now, the running back room is not the only one that's got some action going on. Josh Simmons has played more snaps, maybe jumped in there a little bit more than we expected. Andy Reid spoke about him on Thursday as well. What other risers? And I would put him on the rise is the way that I mentioned that, because he's ahead in terms of participation of where I thought he would be. Who else is rising to you?
Well, from what it sounds like, Omar Norman-Lott had a good day. Had a pass breakup, or had, I think, a tip ball. Obviously not a pass breakup, but a tip ball. And Nazeeh Johnson, I think, had a tip ball that he ended up intercepting. And from what we're hearing, it looks like he's running with the starters right now. So we'll see if that continues. There's questions as to why Fulton isn't running with the starters. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I'm not too worried about it. I'm sure Christian Fulton is going to be a starter once the season is getting underway.
Yeah, available but not fully healthy is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And there's no reason to push him right now. So
no, you gain nothing by doing that. And let's take it easy. Let's be mellow. You want to keep him for the year, okay? I think that would be nice to have.
I'd rather have him for January and February than have to worry about whether or not, he's ready to go as of September, the first game.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is going to be a problem regardless. But if I'm looking at it, I'd rather have him for January and February than have him 100% ready to go for the first game of the season. So
agreed. I don't think this last guy is a surprise. But Jaden Hicks is growing into his role, not just on the field where he's making some
Hicks
plays.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Shocking, right? But the way he laid it out today at his presser about just how much that Justin Reid took him under his wing and kind of taught him the ropes of how to be what he needs to be. That just tells me that the writing was on the wall for Justin Reid all last season. And he knew it was very unlikely that he would be back in town. And he was willing to be the mentor to pass all of that on. And that we will now be the fan base that reaps the benefits of it.
Yeah. And thank you, Alex Smith 2.0 at the safety position, because that's the way I'm looking at this. And I'm not trying to say Jaden Hicks is going to turn into the Patrick Mahomes of safeties, but when you're sitting here looking at it, Reid did something he didn't have to do. A lot of players, a lot of veterans aren't going to go and take a young guy under their wing and teach them everything to take their job. That's essentially what he did.
That's what Joe Flacco won't do. I'm not here to be a mentor. Guys can take that attitude.
Well, and Brett Favre, I think, said the same thing when he was, with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, there's multiple different situations where that's not going to be the case. And Kansas City continues to get players that are willing to do that. And the reality of what that means to me is that they're getting guys that know that their time in football is limited and they want championships, and they're willing to sacrifice even personal stuff to have a chance at going and getting those championships. Because the other part of that is he has to get him ready, because he doesn't know that he's going to be able to finish the season. So it's not just replacing him for the future. It's also possible that he has to step in and play a huge role in a pivotal playoff game or the Super Bowl. So the thought process there is get your guys ready and get them out there and get them performing.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that he is preparing himself to be a different kind of playmaker. He had a couple of comments, and one in particular stood out to me about how he dealt with and ended up making a decent play on being in a rotation where you know that even as a split high safety, you're going to have to take one of the receivers, man on man. And when you send a corner blitz, especially out of the nickel position, that safety has to rotate down and take that assignment. And when you know you're staring across Xavier Worthy, the fastest guy to ever run in the combine, you know you're at a disadvantage. But I thought he clearly and eloquently outlined what you have to do and why folks are so frustrated with the Chiefs' deep game as of late, the last couple of years, is exactly what he was able to do. He's like, when you know you have a speed guy, you know you just have to stay on top of him and the route. Meaning that you have to do your best to take angles that give you the depth advantage, knowing that he's faster than you, and keep him in front of you. When you're able to do that, you're able to be an effective defender, even against the deep ball, against speed.
Well, and the best part about that is that you have the fastest guy in the NFL in Xavier Worthy that you're going to be practicing against every single week. So you're going to be seeing it every single week. You're going to see it every single practice, and you're going to be able to get that part of your game down to figure out, okay, this is how I need to be doing this. And yeah, you're going to have to adjust it for every single game because you're not going to be going against guys that are as fast as Worthy, but it gives you the ability to set up and get ready for that, to where you hope that you don't become a loose or a bad position during a game sometime and get burnt deep because you read wrong or you took the wrong angle, which is a huge deal when you're talking about guys playing in the back end of the defense.
It allows you to be more adaptive, and with what the expectations are for him, what the expectations are for Cook, what the expectations are for Watson to go along with Trent. I think that there's a lot more hope for upside than we've seen evidence of until we're starting to see a little bit of it come out now. And I think it's coming to fruition what we are hoping to see. Let's hope that they can stay on that path. If you guys want to talk risers, fallers, guys that you're concerned about, let us know. Put it in the comments down below on YouTube. Make sure you hit us on social at Ryan Tracy NFL, at Chris Clark NFL, at Locked On Chiefs. We're always there. Make sure you like and sub. As we know, there are more things coming next week. We get a little more details. We get ready for mandatory training camp. What's going on with Travis Kelce? We're going to tell you about that. What does that mean for this team? And what does the potential for Trey Smith mean when we see or don't see him coming up? So have a great weekend. We thank you for being with us. Make sure you're subscribed, and we are going to get with you next time. Matt will be back next week as well for his inside takes on your Kansas City Chiefs. Thank you and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you then.